Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Friday, the 30th of January, for my, hang on, get my microphone right. This Friday, the 30th of January, for our weekly Friday Live, my weekly Friday Live. Fiona Lukey's here, coming to you via Facebook and YouTube. So welcome, everybody. If you've got a question, feel free to post it in the comments below. It's very hot here today. Woo! We are in the height of summer, and it's roasting outside. I know many of you in the Northern Hemisphere, and a number of my clients are telling me anyway that the ice and snow has been pretty extreme this year. So probably hard to imagine that we're roasting over here in good old Oz while you guys are buried under tons of snow and ice over there. But it is, it's really hot. The aircon in my office is not keeping up with the heat today. So anyway, as always, please say hi. Hi, Deezer. Lovely to see you. It's freezing here. Yeah, I bet it is freezing in Colorado. Absolutely. It'd be stunningly beautiful though, but yeah, very cold. Yeah, we are literally having an opposite extreme with the weather. Lots of fires, all sorts of terrible things going on over here in terms of the impact of the heat. But yeah, it's very hot here. So if you have a question, this is what these Friday Lives are all about. If you're new to my work, or if you just stumbled across me somewhere, somehow, I go live every Friday, pretty much most Fridays, to answer any questions that you have, to kind of give you a fresh take on relationships, the mind, our funny little human, which is the name of the book that I published last year, available on Amazon. And, to really show you a different way of approaching life and relationships. As human beings, we overcomplicate things to a degree that we don't realize or recognize. And there is a simpler, easier way to move through life, to move through relationships, to move through all of those things. Yes, Sheila. Hello, darling. Of course I remember you. Oh, you'd be cold in Toronto. Very, very cold there. Oh, thank you, darling. I'm so good. I'm so glad to hear that you're so well, Sheila. Forever grateful to you for changing my life. Oh, thank you, honey. Thank you for saying that. I really, really, really appreciate that. And I'm so happy for you. That's wonderful to hear. Thank you for jumping on and saying hi. It really means the world, and means the world for you too, Deezer, to jump in and say hi. I do these things. I have no idea if anybody watches them or how much impact they have, but I just show up every week. I've let go of the attachment to how many viewers, what happens. I'm just going to be of service. That's what these Friday Lives are all about. Just about being of service, and hopefully someone out there hears something that helps them in some way. We are at a point, and I think this is a very interesting year that we're moving into, as the planet, as the planet moves into a 1 year, and we move from the snake to the horse, the fire horse. It's a really interesting time for so many of us. And what we need more of in the world is love, fulfillment, understanding, compassion, kindness, patience, and people truly understanding who they really are. We need simplicity. We do not need more complexity. Right? We need simplicity. This is what the world needs. And, when we bring more of that to our own lives, our relationships transform, our well-being transforms, and that ripples out to places you can't even possibly begin to imagine. It's super, super, super important. So this is what I'm here to remind people of. This is the heart and soul of my work. And, whilst my passion, my focus is on relationships, because we are in a relationship with something, everything, every moment of every day. You're either in a relationship, you're in a relationship with yourself, you're in a relationship with life, and you are in a relationship with others every moment of every day. And it is so, so, so fundamentally important to the well-being of the planet that people know how to do relationships well, right? Because when we know how to do them well, connection becomes easy. And for human beings, connection is as important as oxygen. And there are an awful lot of disconnected people in the world right now, and people are struggling, and for good reason. I'm not there's no blame anywhere, but I just want to point people in a different direction, because the more we look in the direction of problem and complexity, the more disconnected we feel, because we get into that cycle of overthinking and hopelessness because it all just looks like, what's the point? It's too hard. It's too this, it's too that. And I just want to show you there's another pathway forward where you don't have to feel as impacted by what's going on in the world, by the people around you. And this is good. This is good for you. This is good for the people around you. This is where your power lies. And in my opinion, the entire consciousness of the planet lies, is looking in this direction. I'm not trying to say that I'm some guru and I have every answer. I don't mean that. What I mean is I'm pointing you in a direction where you get to see things differently. You get access to thinking that maybe you've either never had before or not had for a very long time. You operate at a higher level of awareness and consciousness. And when you do that, you are more loving. When you do that, your energy changes, your frequency changes. And when our energy and our frequency changes, it impacts everything around us. Like, if it's the one thing I would want everybody to know, is you are way more powerful than you've ever been given credit for. And I mean, just by the powers that be. And you're way more powerful than you've ever been given a chance to understand, right? So the more you see that, the more you understand that, the more you get to see the choices that you have, even when it looks like nothing is going your way. And I don't say this in a vacuum. I've certainly had very, very, very difficult things go on in my life where it's looked like it has appeared as though nothing is going my way. And it has felt very unfair. It has felt bigger than me. Life has felt hard, all of those things. So I don't say those things as someone who's had this, really easy, perfect go in life. I say that as someone who's had to navigate very challenging things. And because of that, I see things so differently, and I'm so grateful. And so I want everyone to have an opportunity to learn and know that for themselves, because as you change, the people around you will change. They may not change exactly the way you would like them to, but it impacts everyone around you. I just cannot tell you how important this is. And to me, being good at relationships is the number one skill that we all need to have in life. There is no reason for you not to be good at them. Now, I know some of you are going to listen to me and say, yeah, Fiona, but you don't understand the way I was brought up. You don't know the trauma I've gone through. You don't know the kind of parents I had. You don't know what I'm dealing with right now. And I whilst I hear that, and I can completely appreciate why you would be feeling that way, I really want you to know that you can do relationships exceptionally well, irrespective of your past, your upbringing, your gender, your race, your culture. This is something that we are naturally designed to do well. It's just that we're not taught this stuff. We're not taught what I call the foundational things that enable us to build a relationship from the ground up. Everything that's out there is more kind of top-down stuff. Top-down stuff to me is things like communication techniques, date nights, personality profiling systems, teaching people how to be in rapport, reading scripts. I mean, I saw an ad the other day where someone said, I'm going to give you the exact scripts that you can say to your partner. And I thought to myself, like, I appreciate everyone's, there are probably some helpful things in there, but you reading a script, I just want you to think about that, right? If you're reading a script, even if it's not in your hands, but it's in your head, are you in your heart space when you're doing that? Are you connected? Are you listening? Are you present? Because what you'll only be present to is the script, right? If you're reading a script, what you're present to is the script. And that is not going to give you the insights and the thinking you need to be able to do relationships well, to have a great relationship with yourself, to have a great relationship with life. Something that is very undermined, I think. It's deliberately undermined for many reasons, and something that we don't look at. It's underestimated. When you have a great relationship with life, you will find it easy to let go of the past. Right? You'll find it easier to let go of the past. When you have a great relationship with life, and what I mean by a great relationship with life is You trust that things work out, even if you can't see it. You trust that things are working for your greatest good. You have belief in something bigger than you. You don't carry everything on your shoulders. You don't feel like if it's going to be, it's up to me. Someone who's got that going through their head, if it's going to be, it's up to me, is someone who does not have a great relationship with life. And if I was working with someone and I heard that, or I could sense that this is someone carrying the weight of the world upon their shoulders, that'd be something that we'd be looking at together. Because when you have a great relationship with life, you hand things over. Now, this is very good for us on a number of reasons. Number one, it lightens our mental and emotional load. Number two, it creates valuable emotional bandwidth. Number three, we take things less personally and we are just lighter energetically. And number four, we move forward with more ease. So I could go on and on as to why that is important, but it's these three areas of our lives that underpin everything. And I feel as though it's not something that we recognize the importance of enough. We're very good at investing money in personal trainers and, nutritionists and stock markets and all of those things, our cars, our this, our that. But to me, when you have the foundations right, meaning you're doing this stuff well, you're comfortable in your own skin, you have faith and trust in life, you know how to get over yourself, right? This is something people struggle with. You know how to get over yourself. This will have far greater an impact on your mental and emotional well-being, your capacity to earn, your levels of success, your health. I mean, I could just go on and on around how important this is. But because this is kind of non-tangible stuff in many ways, we tend to, I think, put more focus on the tangibles, right? Because tangibles, you can see a change in a tangible thing. You can see it. You've got a starting point, a change point, and an ending point with something that's tangible. Something that's non-tangible like this, we're talking about levels of awareness. We're talking about insight. We're talking about fresh thinking. We're talking about connection. We're talking about love. Like they're not as tangible, right? They're intangible. So as human beings, I think we just find it a little more tricky to look in the direction of the intangible stuff. Yet it's the intangible, right? It's the intangible that impacts the tangible, right? The intangible impacts the tangible. Absolutely. 100%. No exceptions. So it's important that we start here. It's important that you start here. And it's one of the reasons I talk about the foundations of something versus the stuff that's top down, and that's particularly a lot of the stuff that's out there in the relationship space. And I don't mean to put those things down. Those things can be really helpful, but they are not the things that create long-term sustainable change. There's lots of information out there: attachment styles, love languages, like as I said before, communication styles, masculine and feminine energy. And these are all really interesting things. Don't get me wrong. I've studied them all, looked at them all, very familiar with them all. But I can tell you right now, when my husband and I got in trouble, 16 years ago, and we got into big trouble, like we were about to separate, none of those things helped us. I had all of that information, but what I didn't know how to do was really get over myself. What I didn't have was a great relationship with life. And what I didn't have was a great relationship with myself. And without those things underpinning the knowledge of the others, it didn't give me the traction, or us the traction that we needed to move forward. It was only as I understood the power of those three things and I healed those three things, I changed those three things, that everything else started to fall in place. And it doesn't mean that my life is perfect and easy. Life is a contact sport, and there is always stuff happening all the time that just kind of knocks the wind out of you, right? You think that you're moving in this direction and something comes along and knocks you sideways that you didn't see coming. That is life. That's the nature of life. But I think what's so different now is my capacity to move through that has changed. I don't take that as personally. I still have my peace even when things out here are not going my way. I still have capacity to be present and grounded in myself when life is not going my way. I still have this ability to let go and get over myself, come back to the now when life hits, when the unexpected happens. And what does that mean for my relationships, for my well-being? Well, it means the connection stays really high between my husband and I. There's a lot of goodwill between us because I have the emotional bandwidth to do so. I'm not going round and round in my head thinking about that thing that happened yesterday or the day before or last week or last month. It's not consuming me. And what I see with people who don't have these foundations in place, stuff happens and it consumes them. Right? Their minds are just continuously going around and around and around. They're overthinking everything. They're overanalyzing everything. They're looking at everything. They're going back into the past and bringing it into the now, and very innocently making the now a repetition of the past and not understanding why that is happening, right? As I say, it's very innocent. There's an innocence in us all. And that innocence is there because we're not taught how things work. Right? We're just not. So we innocently get lost in our thinking. We innocently look to the past for the answer. You will not find the answer in the past, right? You can find comfort in the past, yes, because the past takes you back to what you know, to what's familiar, even if what's familiar is painful, right? There's still comfort in that. Human beings don't like change. We struggle with the unknown. But here's my next point. If you are someone who struggles with the unknown, that again comes back to your relationship with life. Okay? I trust in life. Doesn't mean that everything's going to work out my way. No, I don't have that expectation. But I trust in life. I trust in life implicitly. That has an amazing impact on me, my well-being, my emotional bandwidth, yeah, that's a whole conversation in itself I could talk about for 3 hours. So the reason why I want to express this and I'm so passionate about it is because I've seen the impact firsthand in my life. And that has just gotten stronger and deeper over 16 years. I've seen the impact in thousands of my students, clients all over the world who've learnt this understanding, who've done my program Relatable, couples that I've worked with. It's like once you have this knowledge, you take it with you everywhere you go. It ripples out in all sorts of areas of your life. And so, every relationship, and you think about this in terms of relationships, every relationship will go through difficult times, right? Whether it be someone loses their job, whether it be something goes on with one of your kids, whether there's health issues, mental health issues, or like people, the loss of parents, every person, every relationship goes through difficult times, but it's not the difficult times that are the defining point, right? This is where people get very confused. It's not the difficult times that is the defining point. It's what you do with that, what you make that mean, how you move through that, and where you are on the other side of that. That becomes the defining point. And to me, this is where people get very lost and very stuck. Okay? The problem is never the problem. It looks like it is, but I promise you, and I can say this with absolute, it might be triggering and confronting for some people to hear. I can say this with 100% certainty. The problem is never the problem. I've been working with that many people now for that many years where I feel like I'm qualified to make this statement. Every time I work with someone or every time one of my students learns this understanding, they realize that, they have that realization. It's actually not the problem. Now, the problem is not the problem. Now, do you want to know the awesome thing about learning that the problem is not the problem? The freedom that comes from that? There's so much freedom when you see that. So much emotional freedom, so much spiritual freedom when you see that the problem is not the problem. When you see that, you are no longer at the mercy of the problem. And I see so many people living their lives at the mercy of a problem that happened 10 years ago, 5 years ago, last week. They're at the mercy of that problem. If only that hadn't happened to me. If only this had been different. If only I'd made a different decision. If only I hadn't married that person. right? If only I hadn't married that person. And, believe you me, guys, I really want you to know that I don't say this in a vacuum. I fled a domestic violent relationship many years ago now. And I look back on it. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful for that experience. I would not be where I am without it. Would I go back and choose that again? Of course not. But I'm able to look back on it and I can see what I've learned. I've learned some invaluable lessons from that experience that have changed the way I teach, the way I show up, the way I move through life. But the problem, right, was never the fact that I was in that relationship. That wasn't the problem. It looked like it at the time. It looked like it. But it's always been about, what do I make that mean? How have I moved through that? And how do I live my life now? Right? See, let me give you an example of what I mean by this. I see people who've been badly done by someone, let's just say. It could be a male, it could be a female, just a human being. And then they'll come to me and say, Fiona, because of that thing, I can no longer trust women, or I can no longer trust men, or I can no longer trust that things work out for me, right? I can't anymore. So what they're saying is, so this is what they've made that mean. This happened, and therefore that means I cannot trust. So what are they doing now? Even though the problem was 10 years ago, they're now in this moment of now operating from a place of I don't trust. Insert whatever that is here. Now, of course, if you show up to the world from a place of I don't trust, life will meet you there. Life will meet you there, because life is not about, life doesn't operate the way a human being thinks life operates. People think life operates like this. Well, if you go through enough hard times, things will turn around and go your way. If you deserve good things, you'll get good things. No, it just doesn't. Life operates based on the frequency that you operate at. That's how it works, because it's all about energy and frequency. So if your energy and frequency is I don't trust, what do you think is going to happen as you move through life? What are you going to be met with? Right? What are you going to be met with? You're going to be met with untrustworthy people, untrustworthy situations where you get taken advantage of, right? Because you are now an energetic match for that. And then you'll turn around and say, see, this happened. This is why I can't trust. And it's like getting people to see this. And I realize for some of you listening, this may sound confronting, but this is just how the world works. This is why it's so important to understand the way the world works, the way life works. So you don't take it personally and you can start to choose something else, right? If you knew that being in the energy of this would attract the same thing in your life, the one thing you don't want, if you understood that's how it worked, well, then instead of deciding that you can't trust, you would start looking at ways in which you could change your energy, wouldn't you? So that's a whole different conversation. So this is why understanding things from the ground up is way more important than that top-down stuff, okay? The top-down stuff is secondary. I've had people come to me, have learned all of those things, have got lots and lots of those books on their shelves, learn this understanding, and they say, Fiona, I don't need any of that stuff anymore. I'm like, yeah, no, that's true, you don't. I don't need to know about, and I'm not going to name them because it sounds like I'm putting those things down, which I'm truly not. I don't need to know about X. I don't need to know about Y. No, you don't. I just need to know about how human beings work. Yes, because that's all we actually really need. And so when you simplify things, life becomes simple. Funny about that, isn't it? Because that's what you're in the energy of. That's what you're in the frequency of, right? We're in the energy. When you are in the energy and the frequency of simplicity, life becomes simple. And I'm telling you, simplicity is a beautiful, beautiful way to move through life. But in order to live from a place of simplicity, you have to know how to get over yourself. You have to know how to navigate your thinking. You have to understand how to create your reality. You have to know about the psychological functioning of a human being. You just do. Because when you do, complexity stops making sense. It just stops making sense. You become naturally attracted to simplicity. And when we look in the direction of simplicity, we are calmer, we're grounded, our minds slow down. There's not as much emotional churn that we go through. Nowhere near. Our minds get much, much, much quieter naturally. We find ourselves more moved by simple things. We don't need as much noise. We don't need as much stuff. This is fantastic for our well-being, fantastic for our relationships, and fantastic for our levels of connection. There's a lot of comments here, so I just want to reply to some of these. Susan, hi, it's even cold in Florida right now. Wow, really? If it's cold in Florida, it must be cold. I actually had a client, I was actually working with some people in, is it Maryland, yesterday, and they told me it was cold in Florida, that Florida was having a cold snap. So yeah, well, there you go. You guys are freezing. Thank you, Deezer. The ripple effects of what you share are far-reaching. Thank you, honey. I appreciate your words. Julia. Okay, hi, Julia. Thanks for saying hi. Diap. Hi, Diap. Great to hear from you. Good to see some new people on YouTube listening to me. Sheila, your approach to relational issues is brilliant. Your message that emotions are like weather was an instant insight that transformed me in my relationships. I'm so glad to hear that, Sheila. That's so awesome. And have you heard, Sheila, that I am coming to the US in August? I'm going to run a retreat in August. I'm just finalizing the dates, but I will be running a retreat in the US in August next year. So this is specifically for my Relatable students. Anyone who's done Relatable will be invited to that, and I'm looking forward to giving you the dates as soon as I can confirm that. Hey, Brian, nice to hear from you. That's awesome. So if there's anyone from Relatable listening to this, I am running a retreat in Melbourne from the 1st to the 3rd of May, and I will be running a retreat in August in the US. So again, dates to be confirmed, but it will be somewhere around early to mid-August, I think. Deezer, everything Fiona says is true. It's not about doing things differently. It's about seeing things differently. Yes. And, I thank you for saying that, Deezer, because I don't think people understand how enormous our capacity is to see things differently. I wouldn't have understood it either, that the capacity we have to see things differently, because it kind of looks like if that thing happened, I'm kind of stuck with that thing, right? That's how life looks. And I promise you that is not how it works. All right? It's not how it works. You are not governed by that. You are not stuck by that. That is the big misunderstanding we all live from. That is the illusion that we live from. The great thing about human beings is we have the capacity to have any experience around anything. That's the capacity we have. That's the potential we all live in. And I wish everybody knew that, because I think if everybody knew that, instead of feeling like I'm broken because, or my life is smeared or marked because, right? It gives us a fresh start, doesn't it? Knowing that gives you the potential for a fresh start, a completely fresh start with anyone and anything, if you want it, right? I'm not saying you have to have a fresh start, but it gives you the potential of that. Now, to me, how amazing is that I can have a fresh start around anything and anyone? The world then opens up, doesn't it? Completely opens up. Instead of I'm stuck with this thing, and therefore I can't move forward because this thing happened. That means something. And this is the amazing thing about this understanding, is you have the capacity for a fresh start. And so what does that mean in a relationship? Well, it means that couples who've been struggling, and it may not be a couple, it could be a colleague at work, it could be a family member, it could be your next door neighbor, right? But all of a sudden, when a fresh start is on offer, like really, truly a fresh start, people see each other with fresh eyes, with a fresh lens. Now, here's what I've seen in relationships that creeps in. Contempt creeps in, resentment creeps in, judgment creeps in, frustration creeps in. And before people know it, that's the lens with which they are looking at each other through. Right? I started with a new couple yesterday, And he said to me, Fiona, I don't like conflict of any kind. I think people who, yell and scream and say things to each other just behave really poorly. I think it's really poor behavior. I don't do that. I always stay calm. I'm always very measured. I never lose my temper, right? And I say this because I could see that in his mind, he saw himself as the better person because of that. Now, I'm not saying that was necessarily something he was conscious of, but I could see it in his energy. I could feel it in his frequency and resonance. And so I was trying to explain to him that the sheer fact that you think that puts you and your wife at loggerheads. Because if she's trying to express herself and she's emotional and maybe she's yelling, there's going to feel no room and space for her to express herself. And I said, things like that build in people. They build. He was sort of saying to me, we get along for a few weeks and then there'll be this explosion. And I went, I can see why. Right? If there's no room for you to express yourself, if it's not safe for you to say how you feel, if you know it's going to be met with judgment, if you know it's going to be met with someone going, oh, here we go again, if you know it's going to be met with contempt, right? That kind of stuff builds in people. And of course, it's going to explode until people get over it, they calm down, and then it builds again. And so, I could see immediately where we needed to start and some things that needed to change so that he could just see that lens with completely fresh eyes. Because, it's not the conflict that's the problem. Remember I said before, it's not the problem that's the problem. It's what we make it mean, it's how we move through it. It's what we make it mean, it's how we move through it. And this is the stuff that people struggle with, right? We don't know how to deal with our own and somebody else's emotional frailties, as I call them. And emotional frailties are part and parcel of being in relationship. They're going to happen. Doesn't matter who you're in a relationship with. They are part and parcel of that. But if we don't know how to navigate our way through that, or we've got this fixed viewpoint, this rigid viewpoint, and in my mind, what he was sharing, and it goes, it's innocent in his, I say this like with no judgment of him whatsoever. There's no judgment. It's just, I probably would have had thoughts like that myself once upon a time. It's just, you don't know what you don't know, and you can't choose what you can't see. And so if we can't see that we've got a rigidity around something, then we can't choose something else. If this looks like the absolute truth, then there's nowhere else to go, right? How do you get a fresh lens if this is the truth, if this is the way things are? And so, when we operate at a higher level of consciousness or awareness, we are in a more loving frame of mind. And in a more loving frame of mind, things like contempt, things like resentment, things like frustration, things like judgment just don't make sense, or don't make as much sense. And I say this as someone who used to have a lot of resentment, a lot of self-righteousness, a lot of contempt, and I would innocently feel that in myself because I did not understand this stuff. I'd been taught all the top-down stuff that I was talking to you about at the start of this live. And whilst I found that stuff fascinating and interesting, it didn't help me with those fundamental, foundational things. And this is all of the stuff that I teach in my signature program, Relatable. Because when we see this stuff, when we operate it through that lens, we are more peaceful, grounded, we're at home. The contempt falls away because it doesn't feel good and it doesn't make sense. The resentment falls away because it doesn't feel good and it doesn't make sense. The judgment falls away because it doesn't feel good and it doesn't make sense. And in fact, the judgment, contempt, resentment, self-righteousness starts to almost feel like that fingernails on a chalkboard when you go there. It's like, oof, like that's how it starts to feel. Like it's like, that's not what I want in my life. That's not what I want to be in the creation of. That's not what I want to be in the energy of. Because you have so much more awareness of what's going on, those things stop making sense. Whereas when you don't have that awareness, right, they all make sense because you look at here and you go, well, yeah, I can't help it because of this and this and this, and I'm like this because of this, and they did this, therefore there's this. And, we're in full justification mode. We're in full kind of I guess justification mode is the best way to describe it, really. We're just in full justification mode. And in justification mode, you can't see anything different. That's why, we talk about when we're looking out here for the answer, and out here is the past, out here is the person, out here is the situation, right? When you're looking out here, that's what out here means. You will not find the answer that you need. You will just find justification for why it's okay for you to be X, why it's okay for you to think Y, why it's okay for you to behave like Z, right? You'll just find more justification. And, what I find is by the time people come to me, goodwill is low, very low, which means emotional safety isn't there, which means trust isn't there, which means you're kind of in that state of mind of I defend me, and I defend me. I'll call them the two me's. When you're in the two me state of mind, people are very kind of locked into their position. They're locked in because that's the only place they feel safe, right? They don't feel heard. There's not enough or very little sense of working as a team. And so they bunker down into these viewpoints even more. And then, if you spend a lot of time focusing on the problem, okay, people become more justified in that stance. And so it becomes even harder to then be able to put that stuff down and look at yourself, the situation, and the person you're struggling with fresh eyes. Now, remember, it's very important about fresh eyes. Fresh eyes brings a fresh energy, right? A fresh energy is life-changing. Life-changing. I just want to share a quick story about what I mean by that. This was a few years ago now. I was working with a lady. She and her husband had separated. They'd been separated for 4 months, I think, by the time I started working with her. I worked with her for about 6 months. She did my Relatable program. She did some one-on-one sessions with me. And she was only seeing her husband once every kind of 5 or 6 weeks. He was very angry. He was very shut down. He was working in another town, basically. And so they were living a long way away from each other at that point. And they'd catch up once a month or so for the kids to see him or whatever, but they had very little interaction. Like I said, I worked with her for about 6 months, and she went through an enormous shift change, her energy change. She put stuff down. She saw things with fresh eyes, all the things that I'm talking about with you. And about 2 weeks after we finished working together, I get this phone call, and it's her husband, the one that she's been separated from, and they hadn't got back together at that point. They were still separated by the time we finished working together. And he rang me, and he said to me, Fiona, I wouldn't normally make a phone call like this. Like, I'd never ring someone like you. But he said, I just have to, I asked my wife if I could get your number because I saw my wife recently and we spent a little bit of time together, which we haven't done for a very long time. And he said, I can't explain it to you, Fiona. My wife got out of the car. It looked like my wife. It sounded like my wife, but my wife had completely changed. Like the feeling she had, and he didn't, he was a pretty, what's the word? Not someone who's au fait with this kind of work or language. So he said, I don't know what you call it, but she felt different. She felt so different. It was like this totally different feeling. What he was saying to me was her energy had changed, right? He said her energy had changed. So he didn't say her energy had changed. He said the feeling had changed. And he said, I couldn't believe it. I just fell in love with her all over again. It was like all the things that have been blocking us. I don't know. I can't explain it to you, Fiona. I don't know. I don't have the words to describe it. I just wanted to ring you and tell you, I don't know what you guys did, but it was so different that all the stuff that had been between us just fell away. And, I thanked him for his phone call and, all of those. And he said they'd reconciled and they were doing really well and they're still together now. I checked in on them recently. They're still together now. So I think this would be like 3, maybe 4 years ago. And what he was saying to me was her energy had changed. And because of that, he didn't have to be in that. I'm not saying it was her fault that they separated. Don't hear it that way. But this is the power when one person changes, significantly changes, when there's a significant shift in their energy, when there's a significant shift in the way they view the world and they view someone, it changes the feeling. And this is the one thing you can't fake. As I was trying to explain to this the new client I was working with yesterday, even though you may not be saying that you find it frustrating when your wife gets angry, that you see it as poor behavior, even though you think you're staying calm, it's in your energy. And she absolutely will be feeling that. And he said to me, she'll be saying, I said to him, I bet she says things to you like, I don't feel like I can express how I really feel around you. You're not really interested in what I have to say. You don't really listen to me. And he said, how did you know that? And I said, well, because if it's in your energy field, that's what they're going to pick up on. That's just how it works. It's just how it works. I'm not a mind reader, but I know the way energy works and I know the impact it has on other people. And so if you're one of those people who's patting yourself on the back because you've got these judgmental, self-righteous, rigid thinking about someone, but you're not expressing it, I'm telling you, you are. You're expressing it. If it's in your mind, it's in your energy field. You can't fake this stuff. You cannot. It's impossible, because we are energetic beings and we are operating at an energetic level first before we are operating on any other level. And, and I say this to all of you, that if you're listening to me, some of you are feeling skeptical about what I'm saying. Take a moment. Everyone's had an experience of this, where maybe through work or a social gathering, you've been introduced to someone and maybe you've shaken their hand or you've said hi to them and they've said hi to you, but you've got this weird vibe. You're like, there's something off about that person. Something doesn't feel right about that person. You are picking up on their energy. So they're being polite. They're saying, hi, nice to meet you. But you're like, whoa, there's something not right here. That's exactly what you're doing. You're picking up on their energy. You're picking up on the fact that they're not in alignment. The energy is not in alignment with this. And when those things go out of alignment, people become very suspicious, very skeptical. They're on edge because they know something's not quite right. Now, imagine this going on for days, weeks, months, years in a long-term relationship. That's why if you don't take care of the stuff from the ground up, if you don't change the foundations, which is all the things that I teach, you will keep coming back to the same point. Because when the foundations change, the energy changes. That has to change. It has to change. Nothing will change until that happens. Now, I think the great thing about understanding the way human beings work is you know when your energy has changed. You're so aware of it, you know it. You come from a deep knowing. That in of itself is incredibly freeing and very good for our human. Hi, Jody. Hi, darling. Thanks for saying hi. Lovely to hear from you. Lynn Matthews, you're welcome as always, honey. Lisa, I can't wait either. You too. You're talking about the retreat I'm holding in the US. Yes. Hi, Brian. Hi from a newbie. Welcome, Brian. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for saying hi. Really appreciate it. Feel free to let me know where you're from. Jody, so freeing and helpful to know we're all living in different realities. I have power to create mine. Yes, so freeing and helpful. Jody is in my Relatable program. Love that. Thanks for sharing that, honey. It only takes one person to create change in a relationship. Mine is forever changing, getting better every day. Thank you, Fiona. You are so welcome, Deezer. Thank you for sharing that, honey. I so appreciate it. Hi, Sally. Hi, darling. It's really nice to hear from you, honey. I hope all is well for you on the sunny coast. Okay, I have been raving on here for nearly 45 minutes. Wow. Okay. Appreciate everyone for hanging out and listening to me. Hi, Carol. Chilly, Quebec in Canada. Oh, I bet it's chilly over there for you in Canada, Carol. I really wish you. Lovely to hear from you, Carol. I hope the sun shines there soon. I hope some of that ice and snow melts soon. Thank you, everyone. I do appreciate your comments. I do appreciate you being here. And I will be here next week at 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time. So if you have a question you would like me to answer, feel free to send it to hello@fionalucas.com.au and I will answer it for you. If you want to join my Relatable program, you want to know more about it, as always, I'm putting the link here for you. I think that's it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening. If you've been here for the 45 minutes, thank you for listening to what I have to say. Sending you lots of love, and I will see you next week. Take care, everyone. Ciao.